If you could see the world as I see it, maybe you'd understand. For me, colors are not just visual, they have sounds, textures, meanings. The sound of the wind is a deep blue with silver streaks. A child's laughter is a vibrant, pulsing rainbow. This happens all the time, effortlessly, without pause. Sometimes it feels like a gift, other times like a burden. My room is the only place where I can turn all of this into something comprehensible. It's small, but cozy, with thick curtains that block out the light from outside and a painting table always messy, surrounded by stacked canvases. Each one is a piece of me, a translation of what my mind perceives when the world feels too big. My mom, Martha, has always respected my space. She knows that my silence isn't disregard, but part of who I am. One morning, while I was working on a canvas filled with golden and violet tones, she appeared at the door with a smile. "Are you painting that music you heard yesterday?" she asked, tilting her head to observe the canvas. "Yes," I replied, not taking my eyes off the brush. She walked closer, setting a cup of tea beside me. "It's amazing how you can turn sounds into something so beautiful. Have you ever thought about showing this to more people?" "No," I answered automatically, a knot forming in my stomach. "People think it's strange." She sighed but didn't insist. My mom always knew when to stop, even when she wanted to push me beyond my limits. At school, it's a completely different story. The hallways are a sensory storm. Footsteps, voices, blinking lights. Everything feels amplified. The only class where I feel safe is art. Miss Daniels, my teacher, understands that art is my language. When I handed in my first painting, she stared at it for a long time and said, "Lucas, your view of the world is rare. Never hide it." But even with that support, my world still felt small. I wondered if that was enough, until the day everything changed. It was the day of the school's cultural fair, and chaos started as soon as I entered the building. The sounds and smells were overwhelming. Loud music, laughter, hurried footsteps. Everything seemed to vibrate at a frequency only I could feel. My chest tightened, and my breathing grew heavy. I needed a place to escape. I ran to the art studio, closed the door, and tried to block out the world. But the echoes were still in my mind. The sounds had colors, and the colors were spinning, colliding. I grabbed a brush, not thinking much, and began to paint. Deep blue for the low voices, vibrant red for the loud laughter, pulsing yellow for the hurried footsteps. When I finished, I stood looking at the painting. It was messy, chaotic, but it made sense. It was how I felt at that moment. "Lucas," Miss Daniels' voice startled me. She entered slowly, looking at the canvas. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she was silent. "You just did this?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity and admiration. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "This is extraordinary," she said. "You've turned chaos into something tangible. Lucas, this needs to be shown at the fair." "No!" The thought of exposing something so personal filled me with panic. "I don't want people to look at me or at this." She sat beside me, choosing her words carefully. "Lucas, I know it's scary, but art isn't just about what you feel. It's about what you can make others feel. Trust me, they need to see this." Later, she talked to my mom about the idea. Martha, of course, got excited. "Lucas, maybe this is an opportunity to show people how you see the world. You don't have to say anything. Your art speaks for you." After much insistence, I agreed. My painting would be displayed at the fair. I didn't know what to expect, but a part of me, the smallest, almost imperceptible part, was curious. On the day of the cultural fair, I felt the weight of each step as I walked down the school hallway. The gym, where the artworks were being displayed, was already full of voices and laughter. The sound reverberated off the walls, creating a chaos of colors in my mind. My painting was already hanging, right in the center, illuminated by a spotlight. It felt like all eyes would inevitably be drawn to it. My mom tried to reassure me as she adjusted my hair. "It's going to be fine, Lucas. You'll see. Just breathe." I nodded silently, my hands sweating. Miss Daniels came over to me with an encouraging smile. "Your painting looks amazing up there. You must be proud." I just want this to be over, I murmured. She laughed softly. Lucas, it's normal to feel like this. But remember, your art speaks for you. Trust it. I stayed in a corner of the gym, watching from a distance as people began to wander around. Some stopped in front of my painting. I could see their expressions change. Curiosity, surprise, confusion. It made me uncomfortable, but there was also something fascinating about watching their reactions. Then, I noticed an older boy, maybe in his senior year of high school. He had a camera hanging around his neck and stopped in front of my painting, studying each detail intently. After a while, he looked around and saw me. "You did this?" he asked, walking over. I hesitated before answering, but finally, I nodded. "This is amazing," he said, turning his gaze back to the painting. "It's like you captured something between sound and sight, like music that you can see. How did you do this?" I just painted what I hear," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. He smiled. "I'm Ethan, photographer. I try to capture moments through the lens, but what you've done here is something I've never seen before. It's special." As strange as it seemed, I felt a spark of relief. He wasn't judging me. He was trying to understand. Ethan stayed for a few more minutes, talking about photography and art. When he said goodbye, he left me with something that echoed in my mind. The way you see the world is a gift. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. 2 weeks after the fair, we were at dinner when my mom received a call. She answered with curiosity, and her expression quickly lit up. When she hung up, she looked at me, her eyes shining. "It was Mr. Coleman," she said. "He owns a gallery in New York, and he saw your painting through a contact from the school. He wants you to participate in an exhibition." I stood still, trying to absorb the words. New York? A gallery? It was too surreal to process. "This is incredible, Lucas," my mom exclaimed. I don't know. New York is big, loud. How am I going to handle it?" She leaned in, taking my hand. "We'll be with you, me and Ethan, and you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. But think about what this means. Your art is touching people from far away, Lucas. That's special." Ethan showed up the next day, just as excited as my mom. "Lucas, you have to go. It's New York. Imagine what you'll see there. And I'll go with you. You can count on me." Still, I hesitated. The idea of facing something so big made me nervous. Finally, I agreed with a few conditions. My mom and Ethan would be with me the whole time, and I could leave any event if I felt overwhelmed. To my surprise, Mr. Coleman accepted without question. The following days were a whirlwind. I worked on new canvases, trying to channel my anxiety into colors. When we finally boarded the train to New York, everything felt unreal. The city was even more intense than I imagined. The lights shone like stars, but the sounds were loud and confusing, a storm of noise that made me dizzy. Ethan, always attentive, suggested we visit smaller galleries before my exhibition so I could acclimate. In one of them, I found a painting that seemed to speak directly to me. It was full of golden and green tones, like the sound of a flute at sunset. The artist had captured something I also felt, and in that moment, I realized that maybe my vision could connect with others, too. It was the first time I thought, maybe I really have something to offer. Mr. Coleman's gallery was very different from what I imagined. From the outside, it looked modest, almost discreet, but inside it was impressive. A spacious area, with lights carefully placed to highlight each piece. The white walls gleamed, creating a setting that made the paintings seem even more alive. My section was in the center of the gallery. There was a simple sign with the words, "Listening to Colors, Lucas Reynolds." Seeing my name there was surreal. A mix of pride and dread hit me. This was my world exposed to strangers. "Lucas, your exhibition is amazing," Ethan said, walking around the space with his camera. He was taking pictures of every detail, occasionally stopping to adjust the focus. "The lights make your colors shine even more. You really have something special here," Mr. Coleman said, approaching with a smile. "People are going to love it. Don't worry, just trust in what you've created." As much as I wanted to believe him, My anxiety grew as the time for the opening approached. My mom tried to calm me. "Remember, Lucas, you don't have to say anything. Your art speaks for you. We'll be here the whole time." When the first visitors started to enter, I stood in a corner, watching. It was like watching a silent film, seeing people react to my paintings. Some passed quickly, casting curious glances. Others stopped, tilted their heads, trying to understand. There was one moment in particular that caught my attention. An elderly woman, with gray hair tied in an elegant bun, stood in front of one of my canvases for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked, as if she were seeing something deeply personal. But not all reactions were positive. A tall man, dressed in a sharp suit, stopped in front of my main painting. He frowned, adjusted his glasses, and whispered to a woman next to him. I overheard the words, "Interesting but somewhat amateur. Lacks cohesion." My heart sank. This was what I feared. The world thinking my work was a curiosity, but nothing more. "Don't listen to him," Ethan whispered, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Look at that lady over there. Do you think what she's feeling is fake? Your work is touching people for real." I took a deep breath, trying to focus on what mattered. Even so, the critic's words echoed in my mind. The highlight of the evening was the live performance. I would paint while music played, translating the notes into colors in front of the audience. This idea had terrified me from the start, but now it was impossible to back out. The lights adjusted, and the hall went silent. The music began with a soft piano, notes that danced in dark blue and moss green. I grabbed the brush with trembling hands, but as soon as I touched the canvas, something changed. The colors began to form in my mind, and the world around me disappeared. Each note had its tone. Bright yellows for the high notes, deep purples for the low pauses, and golden lines weaving through the melody. I wasn't painting for the people anymore. I was painting for myself, translating the sound into something that made sense within me. When the music ended, I lowered the brush and turned to face the audience. The hall was silent, and for a moment, my heart stopped. Did they hate it? But then someone started to clap. Soon, everyone was on their feet, the sound of applause filling the space. My mom had tears in her eyes, and Ethan seemed about to burst with pride. Even Mr. Coleman, always professional, was emotional. But what really caught my attention was the elderly woman with gray hair. She wasn't clapping. She just looked at me with a warm smile. Her eyes said everything. As the crowd began to leave, she approached me. "Lucas, thank you," she said, her voice soft. "My son was autistic. He always said the world was too noisy, but he could never explain it. Today, seeing your art, I understood what he was trying to show me. You have a gift. Never hide it." Her words made tears roll down my face. For the first time, I realized that my art wasn't just about me. It was about connecting worlds. That night, as I packed away the brushes, I felt a calm I had never felt before. My world, which once seemed so small, now seemed to have space for so much more. Back at the hotel that night, the weight of the day finally hit me. It was a different kind of exhaustion, not just physical but emotional. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at my paint-stained hands. My mom, always attentive, brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me. "You know how proud I am of you, right?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. I nodded, but something still bothered me. "Do you think it was enough? I mean, is my art really good? Or did people just think it was interesting because I'm different?" She held my hands, her words firm. "Lucas, I know it's hard to believe sometimes, but what you do isn't just interesting, it's important. Did you see that woman today? How your art touched her life. It's not about being different, it's about being real." Ethan walked into the room at that moment, holding his camera. "Lucas, I don't think you realize the impact you had today. I took pictures of several people looking at your paintings. They weren't just curious, they were connected. That's what matters." He handed me the camera and showed me a photo. It was the elderly woman, standing in front of my painting, her eyes misty. The image was powerful. For the first time, I began to see my work through the eyes of others. The next morning, during breakfast, Mr. Coleman came to meet us. He was radiant. "Lucas, the exhibition was a huge success. I've received multiple offers from buyers and even some ideas for future collaborations. I want to work with you to take your art even further." I was still processing everything when Ethan added, "That means your art isn't just about you, Lucas. It's about what it can do for people." His words stayed with me as we headed home. For the first time, I began to believe that there was space for my world in theirs. Back in my small town, everything felt different. My room, which used to be my only refuge, now felt like a starting point. It was no longer just the place where I processed chaos. It was the place where I created something that could connect with others. With my mom and Ethan's help, I began planning the next step. Ethan suggested we create short videos showing how I translated sounds into colors. "Think of it as a window into your world," he said. My mom went even further. "What if you did workshops for children who also see the world differently?" The idea scared me at first, but something about it felt right. We started small with a local workshop. One afternoon in the school studio, I gathered a group of kids, some neurodivergent, others simply curious about art. One of them, Emily, caught my attention. She was a shy 10-year-old who barely spoke during the introduction. But when I handed her a brush and asked her to paint the sound of the music playing, her eyes lit up. By the end of the afternoon, she had created a painting full of vibrant tones that seemed to pulse with life. Her mother came over to me, emotional. "Lucas, I've never seen Emily like this. Thank you for giving her a space to express herself." That moment was transformative. I realized that my journey wasn't just about showing my art to the world. It was about helping others discover how to share theirs. As the months went by, the workshops grew, and my mom helped set up a small studio in the garage. Ethan began documenting the sessions, creating a series of videos that reached more people than I ever imagined. One day, I received an invitation from an international arts organization. They wanted me to participate in a collaborative project with other neurodivergent artists, exploring how art could be used to raise awareness about neurodiversity. That night, I sat in front of a blank canvas. The colors began to form in my mind, but this time, something was different. They didn't come just from sounds or emotions. They came from a place of hope, of purpose. With each brushstroke, I felt a growing certainty. My story was just beginning, and more importantly, it wasn't just mine. It was about all of us who see the world in a unique way.